Greetings, pilgrims, and welcome to another episode of the Polygon Pilgrimage. Today I am joined by fellow 3D artist, character artist, Matt Filiault. And say hi, Matt. So Matt is joining us today because he had a question about MaxScript, and we're going to go over a multi-part series here about what is MaxScript, how do we use it, and what are some use cases, and how do we even create buttons for ourselves. And I wanted to take a moment and make a quick note that this is fantastic. This is what we want for the series, is for other artists to join us in the journey. And you know, every artist specializes in different things. I've already learned a lot from Matt in the short time that we've known one another, and I'm happy to have things that I can teach him, such as MaxScript. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so Matt, you had a question about creating some tools inside of Max using MaxScript, and I wanted to first go over with you what MaxScript is, what it isn't, and how we can use it.
All right.
So MaxScript is a scripting language that is built into 3ds Max. And actually, with very few exceptions, everything inside of Max is done via MaxScript in the background. Now, scripting is a little different from programming. Programming, usually you have a piece of software that is designed to write code, and you write that code, and when you execute that code, that's when we double-click an icon on a desktop, it runs the code entirely on its own. So it's sort of, you know, agnostic to any other piece of software. Scripting is like miniature programming inside of another program. So this is kind of like programming shortcuts in the background of Max. So they both work in very similar ways, though. Programming is essentially just a series of instructions, but they are the most specific instructions you'll ever write in your life.
Right.
Now, programming has some language to it. There's, just like when we have verbs and adjectives, programming has things like variables. So the nice part about Max is, in Max we're used to dealing with objects. Here we have, you know, cube, a cone, a torus. These are going to be our sample objects for today. So each of these is an object, and you can see as I click on the objects, obviously they have properties. They have a length, a width, a height. So those are properties of that object. So there are really only four things that we're going to deal with MaxScript. We're going to deal with objects, their properties. We're going to deal with the idea of variables and functions. So I know there's a lot of information to throw at you guys, but I will leave some notes in the description here. Variables essentially is like an invisible box that you can put things in. You can store a value temporarily, such as the length of this cube is 5. So I could store that length as a variable and come back and edit it later. And this is what it would do. We could change the size of the box by changing that variable. Now, we also have functions. Now, a function is like a miniature repeating steps. So essentially, you have a function every time you get up for work in the morning. You get out of bed, you get a drink of water, you shower, you get dressed. Those are all steps, and you do those same steps, theoretically, in the same order every single day. So essentially, from a programming standpoint, you have a get out of bed function, and those are the things that you do when you get out of bed. So with all of that put together, we're now going to go forward, and we're going to actually make some scripts. I'll show you guys how it works. It's really pretty easy once you get a hang of it. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so first part, Matt, you had a question about the ability to remove your turbo smooths from your objects, correct?
Right.
Okay, so what you want is the ability to, we want to do this in mass. We don't want to have to do one at a time, right? So we want to select a whole bunch of things and say, remove all of my turbo smooths, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so what we're going to do here is, to start off with our first MaxScript to do this for us, I'm going to go up here to the top and say MaxScript, new script. No, there we go. Okay, so here we go. We've got a blank script, and we're just going to type commands into this window. Very much like English, but it's going to be a little odd at first. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we do what we're going to do to every object that we have selected. So I'm going to type for object in selection do. Now, I know this is kind of weird and the changing colors, but here's what this means. This is saying, take my selection, which will be all the objects in the scene, and for every object in that selection, so in this case 3, do something, and we're about to tell it what the something is. So you tell it the something by putting the parens rather, pardon me, wrong language. So inside of here, we tell it what to do. So here I'm going to write do stuff. So here we're going to do the stuff that we need to do. And for example here, what we want to do is we want to remove all modifiers. So what we're going to do is say for m in object.modifiers do. So now this is another for loop inside of our for loop. So first we're going to go through our selection, and for every object we're now going to do this block. We're going to go through every modifier, which is what this m stands for, on that object. And what we want to do in here is delete modifier on the object that we have selected of m. So now, does that make sense so far, Matt? Are you lost at all?
Yeah, maybe it'd be good to show how do you find these commands, through the MaxScript listener.
Yes, good idea. So Matt has excellently recommended that we use the MaxScript listener. So here's the listener, and I'll clear out the last things I was doing. The listener allows you to discover the commands inside of MaxScript, because you would not know what to do here for these things. Even though I described it, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to you at first. So you bring up the listener, and this is sort of like a teacher. So when I click an object, look, the listener types select $box 001. So that's the command to select that box. So if I were to type that here, I've unselected the box, and I'm just going to type that again here. Select $box 001. Enter. And look, it selected the box because it told me this is the command to do that. So now anytime I click away, I clear my selection. I can do that as well. And I can select the cone, select the torus. So the $sign means the selected object, and then the name of it if it has a specific name. So you'll see $sign in some of our code later on. So the listener is a great way. Try it out. You can move things around. See if I tell this, move it to this position, undo, all kinds of commands. So this is how you can discover those commands. So we'll leave the listener alone for now, but that's a great, excellent tip about how to find commands. Okay, so let's try out our code. So I'm going to select all the objects in the scene, and I'm going to click and run the script. And right now nothing happens. That's because there's no modifiers on anything. So we want to make sure we know that it works. So let's select all these objects. I'm going to do them individually. And let's add our turbo smooth, because that's what we were originally talking about removing. Let's go ahead and add those. And there's a reason I'm doing them individually, which I'll explain in a later lesson. But now let's go ahead and run that, and there we go. The turbo smooths have all been removed.
So really quick, you didn't have to convert them to editable polys?
No, because they're objects inside of Max. Objects remain of the type object, and an editable poly is still a type of object. So it could be an editable poly as well. Let's take this box and convert it to an editable poly. And now I'll add the turbo smooth again. Select all objects, and I'm going to run the script. And as you can see, the box returns to an editable poly state, because it's still an object. Everything is an object inside of Max.
Okay, so it doesn't really matter what it is.
Right, which is the nice part. That means we can access it if it's an editable poly, if it's an editable mesh, if it's a spline. They're all objects. So it makes it very easy to access them all.
So would editable poly be considered a class of object?
It's a, yes. You have, the way that it works is, I'll type it down here, you have the superclass called object. This is getting into some programming stuff, guys, so don't worry about it if you don't understand or follow. We'll get into this later on. Right now we're just going to worry about this code, but to answer Matt's question here, we have object and class of object. So this is like what's called a parent, and then you have child classes. So you've got object, dot, and then from here you have editable poly, and you can have object.spline. So that's the parent is object, and then from there are. So then also what you have is editable poly dot face. So now you're going down the chain. You start at the top of object, and then you're saying now I want to go to the editable poly, and now down to the face level. So that's just some general programming knowledge there for you guys. But for our purposes with removing the modifiers, these simple 7 lines of code will do it for you. So if you type it just as I have here, and what I'll do is I will increase the size of that for you so you guys can see that on the screen very nice and easy. So this is all the code you need in order to select all of your objects. Control-E is the shortcut, but if you go to, I believe it's Tools, yeah, Evaluate All. That's the command to actually run the script. So if you click that. So if I can add Turbo Smooth to these guys again. And I'll only add it to 2 of them this time. So this third one should remain unaffected. So I select all and run it, and there we go. So there's a simple 7-line piece of code for you, which will remove the modifiers on your objects. So was that helpful for you, Matt?
Yep. Now, how do you make it a button on the toolbar so that you can just click it, or select your objects, click it, and just have it run the command automatically?
That's a good question, and we're going to get to that next episode. So for right now, guys, go ahead and save this script for yourselves. Just do File, Save As, and you can save it somewhere that you like. And next time we're going to talk about how to add it as a button, and we're going to talk about how to more specifically target only Turbo Smooth. Because if you look at the code right now, it's going to remove all modifiers. And what if we have a modifier that we want to keep, but we want to get rid of Turbo Smooth? So we're going to go ahead and do that next time, guys. So as always, I hope you enjoyed. Please continue to practice, get better, and I'll see you next time as the pilgrimage continues.